Imagine a crime so strange, so specific, that the actual blueprint for it seems like it was written years before and written by the accused herself.
It sounds like fiction, right?
It really does, but that's the chilling reality with Nancy Crampton-Brophy. She was a self-published romance novelist, maybe not super famous, but known. And she also wrote this essay titled, How to Murder Your Husband.
Wow.
Yeah. And now she stands convicted of actually murdering her own husband, Chef Daniel Brophy. Okay, let's unpack this. Welcome to the Deep Dive. This is where we take stacks of sources, research, articles, analyses, and boil it all down into what you really need to know. Today we're diving into the, well, fascinating and deeply unsettling case of Nancy Crampton-Brophy. We'll sift through the crime details, look at the cold, hard digital evidence that actually secured her conviction, and grapple with these big questions it raises, about the line between creative writing and criminal intent.
Yeah, it's quite something.
As one analysis we looked at puts it, this case is really where eerie coincidence meets courtroom verdicts. And we're going to look at it through a specific lens that helps make sense of why it feels so strange.
It's definitely an extraordinary situation. And what's particularly compelling here, I think, is how this case forces us, really, to look beyond just the immediate facts. We have to consider these broader things like, identity, the real power of written words, and then the undeniable sort of cold reality of forensic evidence today.
Right.
It's such a striking example of how our stories, the ones we tell ourselves and the ones we write, can just collide in these unexpected and here really tragic ways. It definitely invites us to think about our own narratives and, well, the trails we leave behind.
So let's set the scene. The tragedy itself happened back on June 2018. Chef Daniel Brophy, apparently a well-liked culinary instructor, was shot. Fatally shot in the back and the chest.
Oh.
Yeah, right at the Oregon Culinary Institute in Portland. He was just prepping for his workday, getting ready to teach. A really brutal end. Pretty quickly after that, the investigation zeroed in on his wife, Nancy Crampton-Brophy. She was 71 at the time. She became the primary suspect. And when she was arrested, she pleaded not guilty, which of course set the stage for a big legal battle.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting, and honestly, quite creepy. After Daniel's death, while the police are investigating, word gets out about this essay Nancy had written years before.
So one you mentioned.
Exactly. The one titled, How to Murder Your Husband.
Oh, man.
You can just imagine the reaction, right? This immediate chilling connection everyone made. It was just perfect, almost too perfect, for headlines and public speculation.
And that essay, even before any real evidence came out in court, it just created this filter, didn't it? An unavoidable one. The whole case, for the public at least, was suddenly viewed through the lens of that title.
Yeah. It instantly planted that question. Did her words somehow become fate? And that public perception, whether it's legally relevant or not, it's a powerful thing.
So, yeah, a key point here. There were no direct eyewitnesses to the shooting itself. Nobody saw her pull the trigger.
Yeah.
So how did the prosecution manage to build a case strong enough for a conviction?
Right.
It wasn't about dramatic testimony. It came down to what some analysts call cold digital data, the forensics of the everyday.
Yeah.
Think of it like leaving breadcrumbs, not deliberately, but just by living life online and moving around. Those digital traces became the silent witnesses.
That's exactly it. The prosecution painstakingly put together her digital footprints that really formed the backbone of their whole case. It wasn't one single thing, but like a mosaic.
Yeah.
First, surveillance footage. It placed Nancy's van, which was apparently quite distinctive, near the Culinary Institute right around the time of the shooting. Not just vaguely nearby, but close enough and at the right time to really question her alibi. But maybe even more damning was her internet browser history. Investigators found searches and actual orders for parts to build a ghost gun.
Ah, the ghost gun. Explain that quickly.
Sure. So a ghost gun kit gives you the parts to assemble a working firearm, but crucially, it doesn't have a serial number. That makes it incredibly difficult, almost impossible sometimes, to trace back to who bought it or owned it.
Okay, so that suggests planning.
Exactly. A very deliberate effort, it seems, to get an untraceable weapon. And then on top of that, GPS data from her phone, her devices, tracked her movements. And that data lined up with the surveillance video, placing her at key locations connected to the crime.
And the prosecution didn't just dump this data on the jury. They wove it into a pretty specific and chilling theory about the weapon itself. Their argument was that Nancy bought two different handguns. She used parts from both. maybe swatch a slide or barrel, fired the shots, and then got rid of everything.
How interesting. So mixing and matching parts.
Yeah, the idea was to make it impossible to match bullets found at the scene to any single complete gun they might find later or trace back to her. It suggests, well, premeditation, a really calculated cover-up.
And this just really highlights the incredible power and maybe sometimes the scary power of digital forensics now. We often think of, fingerprints, DNA, the classic stuff.
CSI stuff.
Yeah, exactly. But this case really shows how our everyday online activity, our location data, even just appearing on a random security camera, how all these tiny digital breadcrumbs create this incredibly detailed trail. It can paint a really incriminating picture, even if you think you're being careful. It's a reminder that our digital lives can become, well, an open book, silent testimony.
So the digital evidence covered the how, but prosecutors also needed a why, a motive. And they argued it was financial. They pointed to multiple life insurance policies on Daniel Brophy that Nancy stood to collect.
The money angle.
Yep. Plus, she'd get sole ownership of their house. This financial gain, they argued, was the concrete reason behind the crime. It moved beyond the weird coincidence of the essay to a tangible motivation.
That financial motive is really key, host, because, while that essay grabbed all the headlines, the jury needs something solid, something evidence-based. And the prosecution laid out that she stood to gain quite a bit. We're talking potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars from those life insurance policies, enough to significantly change her financial situation.
Makes sense.
Yeah, that kind of clear financial incentive often becomes the cornerstone in these cases. It grounds everything else in a rational, if dark, explanation that fits within the legal framework.
Okay, so the trial itself happens between April and May 2022. All this evidence is presented. But here's another really crucial detail, one that surprises a lot of people. That essay, the How to Murder Your Husband one, it was actually excluded from the trial.
It wasn't presented to the jury.
Nope. The jury never heard it read out in court.
Yeah, and that exclusion, that was a really important legal call. It was likely excluded because it was considered prejudicial. Basically, the judge decides it could unfairly bias the jury against her, make them judge her based on the essay, the sensationalism, rather than the actual evidence of the murder itself.
I see. So keeping the focus on the facts of this crime.
Exactly. The legal system tries really hard for impartiality, right? And something that explosive, that headline-grabbing, could easily cloud judgment. The court needed the verdict based purely on the evidence related to Daniel Brophy's death, not on her fictional writing from years before.
But even though it wasn't in the courtroom, its themes, its very existence, absolutely dominated the public conversation around the case. You couldn't really separate the crime from the essay in a public mind.
No, impossible.
And it was against that backdrop, this mix of public fascination and strict legal procedure, that the trial wrapped up. So in late May, early June 2022, the verdict came in. Nancy Crampton-Brophy was found guilty, convicted of second-degree murder. The judge then sentenced her to life in prison with the possibility of parole, but only after serving 25 years. A pretty decisive outcome.
And what's fascinating there really is that stark contrast, isn't it, between the very careful legal process inside the courtroom, deliberately excluding the essay, and the huge public narrative outside, which was almost entirely about the essay.
Yeah.
Daniel Brophy's family, his son especially, they spoke about feeling relief that justice was served, which really grounds it back in the human tragedy, Regardless of the public's focus on the literary angle, it just shows those two different ways a story gets told, the courtroom version and the public opinion version.
So, okay, stepping back now, what does this all mean? Beyond just the facts of this specific sad case, how does it change how we think about, human behavior, writing, the law, to really get into cases like this where fiction and reality seem to blur so intensely? We sometimes use this analytical framework we call loop court.
Loop court.
Yeah, think of it as a tool to unpack these situations where you get that eerie coincidence meets courtroom verdicts thing happening.
Yeah.
It helps us ask how someone's creative life, their writing, might intersect with their real actions and intentions.
Exactly. And the big theme that just jumps out when you apply that loop court lens here is reality imitates fiction. It's almost unavoidable. The fact that she wrote an essay literally titled How to Murder Your Husband and then years later is convicted of doing just that.
Yeah.
It's chilling.
It really is.
It forces you to confront this idea, like the analysis says, that maybe words became fate. It makes you ask, when does a story stop being just imagination? When does it start looking like a blueprint? Or maybe reflecting some hidden intention? It's a really deep question this case brings up.
And then there's this clash of identity, right?
Hmm.
Nancy Crampton-Brophy, the romance writer's stories about love, passion, and then Nancy Crampton-Brophy, the convicted murderer. People noted her courtroom composure, too. She seemed calm, apparently, which some people felt just didn't match the awful crime or the damning evidence.
Adds another layer.
Totally. How do we reconcile that? The public persona, the creative identity she built, versus the cold, hard digital data that convicted her. It's a big question about who we really are versus what the evidence shows.
And this raises some fundamental questions, doesn't it? About creative freedom, about personal responsibility, about what criminal intent even is. The loop court analysis zeroes in on this, asking things like, did she script her fate? And crucially, can intent be proven beyond creative expression?
Tough questions.
Really tough. Because how do you definitively link creative work to real-world action? It's not simple. It's not just about what she did, but how her past words, her fictional stories might shed light on or maybe even confuse our understanding of her true intentions. It really pushes the boundaries of how we define and prove intent in court.
Yeah. And it leaves you with this really unsettling feeling that, in her specific case, her fiction just became literal, as that Luke court analysis puts it pretty starkly. Nancy Crampton-Brophy's courtroom becomes her story, written in surveillance, digital footprints, and dark intention. And this time, her fiction is literal, just a haunting thought to end on. So this deep dive into the Nancy Crampton-Brophy case really shows those stunning, unsettling parallels between writing and crime. It absolutely underscores how critical cold digital data and modern forensics are now, especially when there aren't eyewitnesses.
Undeniably.
And maybe most importantly, it leaves us wrestling with these big questions about identity, about intent, and how we interpret creative work when it lines up so disturbingly with reality.
You know, it raises an important question, I think, for all of us. As we all navigate this world, leaving our own digital breadcrumbs everywhere, search history, location data, social media, whatever, and where the lines between what we create online, or even just say, and what we do, can feel surprisingly thin sometimes. How much of ourselves are we revealing, intentionally or not, in the stories we tell, or just the digital trails we leave? And when does that creative expression, or maybe just online chatter, blur into something more? A premonition? A plan? Or even, in the darkest sense, a confession? It's definitely something to think about in this digital age.
That is a really thought-provoking challenge. We definitely encourage you to mull that over, think about this intricate, sometimes terrifying dance between fiction and reality, especially when the stakes get this high.